Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I hope you're doing well. My name is Preacher Moss. I'm the host of the S.O.S. Shout Out Show. Hope you had a great weekend. I tried to have a great weekend. Shout out to all my NFL soldiers that were glued to the television, my NBA heads that were watching balls go through the hoops. Brothers and sisters, I believe that it's very, very important to talk about things that matter to us. You know what I'm talking about. We talk about family, things like that. And we have delved into the space where we talk about money, we talk about finance. A great way to describe the financial picture would be to quote the great Fat Joe, who says, Yesterday's price is not today's price. I love that line. Yesterday's price is not today's price. And as we look at the economy and the issue of inflation, brothers and sisters, he is 100% correct that yesterday's price is not today's price. When we get into this idea of understanding aspects of how economies are tied together, supplies have relationship to other supplies. Supplies have things that are connected to manufacturing. Manufacturing has things that are connected to distribution and delivery and being able to deliver product on time. I'm in a business whereby if you tell a joke, the people in front of you 9 times out of 10 are going to get that joke. However, if I have to take a plane and that plane last year cost me $300, this year, due to fuel costs, it now costs me $600. I now have to look at, is it really beneficial for me to get on the plane? Am I going to be able to recoup enough or have enough of my margins to make that this thing is viable? It makes sense to go do it. I mentioned comedy, of course. The reality is comedy, you're paying for hotels. You're paying for food. Our lives are lived, of course, on the road. Hotels, food, rental cars, airfare, things like that. But it's a heightened existence. What I want to talk about today is the idea, brothers and sisters, that inflation is on the way. No doubt about it. We don't know if it's going to be for 6 months or for 12 months. But all of us, brothers and sisters, are going to feel the brunt of it. From the people who package your food, it used to take this amount of money to package your food. Now it takes this amount of money. Labor costs are going up. And of course, when labor costs go up, the cost of the product is passed on to the consumer. In essence, in the words of the great Tupac in this song, I Get Around, he says, trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents. Now, that quote, brothers and sisters, is not a new quote. But it does reflect what we have to do a lot of times when the economy goes up. When the ability, for lack of a better word, that your dollar no longer buys what a dollar used to be. In fact, if you look at the scope of money, it's two things that can happen. Your money can appreciate, it can appreciate revenue, or it can appreciate debt. Appreciate revenue, appreciate debt. You guys know this. We all grew up around predatory lending and payday loans and all these machinations to make sure that if we got money from people, it meant that we were going to be in debt. If you borrowed $100 on Friday at some places, if you didn't have back to that Friday, you now owe them 30% over the $100 that you bought. And some of us, we fell into that trap. I'll be honest, I've been to the payday loan place. I ain't ashamed to admit it. They were giving money and I took it. My only thing was I knew that I had money coming in. So I could run back, and if I lost $10 on the deal, I lost $10 on the deal. But I knew this was the end of that relationship. A lot of us don't have that opportunity right now. A lot of us are in our homes, we're in our jobs, and we realize that the cost of living is way above or creeping above the actual earnings that we're bringing in. So we're going to talk about that on the Shout Out Show today, and hopefully we're going to break it down. We're going to talk a little bit about inflation, but we're also going to have a conversation about what we could be doing about it. So sometimes trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents isn't a bad thing. It's literally just kind of rewiring our brains to the fact that we have this situation that's in front of us. How do we adapt before it becomes a bigger problem? This is Preacher Moss, the Shout Out Show. We'll be right back. Hit it, Satana. right, before we get started, we want to make sure that we're getting out love and prayers and du'as out to our sick and shut-ins, those that are infirm. In fact, if you have somebody, you know somebody, brothers and sisters, that's not doing well, they're not feeling well, maybe they're a little down. You know what? Send a name to permissiblelaughter@gmail.com. Again, that's permissiblelaughter@gmail.com. And we're just going to start making sure that we say on the show how much we appreciate them, how much we're praying for them, how much we're pulling for them. You know, you got to be a fan of the person beside you who may not be doing better than you. Because in the flip, that person may be a fan when you need them as well. All right. So that being said, shout outs all over the place. I know we have people in the comment section. We're gonna get to those. And for the subject matter, I'm going to try and keep it basic. We're not trying to get finance degrees here. We're not trying to get MBAs in economics or anything like that. But it is a language that we all talk about. This, currency is a language. And I think we should never be afraid to say, wait a minute, how's my dollar turning over? We talk about finance every show. We give a shout out to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. And we talk about these are the aspects. These are the times where you should be looking at financial advisors to help you craft and narrate where you want your money to go. All right. So before we get started, let me give some shout outs. I want to give a shout out also to our comment section. Shout out, Sister Reed. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We know we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you so much. Reed could probably attest to the fact that inflation is going up. Reed has a business where she does catering. And she can tell you that yesterday's price is not today's price. So the price for items, the price for meats, the price for utensils, things like that have gone up. And she is a business person. So that $10, $12 meal now is probably a $15 meal because she has to make sure that she meets her margins, that she's able to be competitive, also be able to cover expenses and have a bit of profit to expand. That's what the game is about. Reed, nice to have you on the show. We appreciate you. Shout out to you, Derek and Juan. As always, a blessing to have you on the show. Hope you're feeling well. Next up, my main Altaf Rashid, Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down. We call him straight up, straight down. He's always on the show all the time. He is I want to say a Canadian ambassador to the show, always on the show, always with good insight, good vibes. We appreciate you coming on the show, brother. We know you're a busy man, but he comes on the show to make sure that we're doing it right on this side of the border and that side of the border. Shout out to my main man, Altaf. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you. My brother Bilal Salahuddin, what's going on, brother, man? You ain't bring the wife on, brother. You're falling off, man. The wife came on and shined on you, boy. I'm messing with you. Bilal, thank you so much for coming on the show, beloved, and we appreciate your support. Feel free to jump in on this conversation because I've been having this for quite a while with brothers and sisters because as a creative, as we say, as a creative, sometimes the creative part is not in the artist and just art. A lot of times we do look at things. I engage, and I've talked about it on the show. I engage in something that's called forecasting. So if I see that there's a supply shortage or supply problems over in the UK, I do kind of postulate how would that affect us here. And I'm sure everybody else does. Sometimes though it's just like theory, but every once in a while that theory becomes reality. That's where we are now. All right. All right. Yes, Lord. There you go. Sister Reed telling you the truth. Yesterday's price is not today's price. Isn't that right, Sister Reed? So I'm going to make sure we get that out. Also, we want to give a shout out to our consultant producer, Sister Sadonna Whitfield, who faithfully comes on the show, make sure that the show is correct. And, I have to say, there's even economy, brothers and sisters, to having a show. We literally sit and try and figure out what are the parameters of the show to make sure that we give you the best show that we can give you. That's why we don't do our daily shows, and that's why we've adjusted because, people have economies of time. I don't even know if people understand that. If you're a television watcher, you have something called the Nielsen ratings, and people really, really calibrate how you watch your TV and when you watch your TV and for how long. So that being said, we want to make sure that we are meeting the required content that people are saying. Then number two is like, we don't want to fatigue people. Fatigue, brothers and sisters, is actually a monetary designation. Fatigue. You can have a fatigue dollar. I don't know if you know that. Okay. So let me begin this thing. I said the economy trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents. We will, brothers and sisters, we already have begun the process where we've had to become inventive or very, very creative with our finances. Now, being creative with our finances, a lot of times people think that, oh, I'm not making enough money. So that's the case a lot of times. You're not making enough money. Or you're not making enough money based against the amount of, I want to say, costs that are out there. And if costs are rising, and sometimes your rate of income is here, it can adjust a lot of times. Like when we had the pandemic, oh, we're still in the pandemic. Let me stop that as my arm throbs from getting the booster shot. The interesting thing about the pandemic was they realized that in the economy, in the overall economic picture, the majority of people in America, because of the stoppages in industry, were not going to be able to pivot. When I say pivot, it meant that they weren't going to be able to turn things around in a quarter and a half. This was going to be at least 2 to 3 quarters where the industry in and of itself, while it was shut down, at the same time had to, for lack of a better word, reimagine itself for its consumers and reimagine itself for its business owners, self included. You guys heard this story, and I'll say it to the end. Yes, I had to stop doing stand-up, but I didn't have to stop doing stand-up. Stand-up just stopped. And you had to look for different areas and avenues whereby you can apply your craft, which is even more difficult when there isn't a marketplace, or there's a marketplace that's not open. So I want everybody to kind of understand what I'm talking about. They're talking about inflation now at a 30-year high. This is incredibly important. If you really want to go back and visit the last big inflation, again, go all the way back to almost like 1976. All right, and there's a period from the 50s up to the 60s where the inflation is really, really high. And of course, it's regardless, it has to do a lot with in terms of political policies. Okay, that's it. But as we look at it today, it's interesting that we have inflation while we have a job shortage. And that job shortage has a lot to do with the fact that people understand that entering into a job market where you're going to be paid a certain amount of money, it doesn't matter if you're employed. It means that you have sustainable income. So the idea of having a job has now given way to sustainable income. And now people are not going because in some regards, as we said, quoting Fat Joe, yesterday's price is not today's price. You can hire me at $20 an hour, but the cost of living requires that I make $35 an hour. So Tom, let's go ahead and bring this up. I have a little bit of a clip that I want to go ahead and start and just have a look at it, brothers and sisters, because this does kind of give us a little bit of a base. I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's going to kind of give you a little tinge, a little taste of what we're talking about after we've been kind of expanding on it. We're going to listen to the experts, or the quote-unquote experts. So, Tana, let's go ahead and go with that.
Everyone is talking about inflation.
Inflation.
It's the word that's been on everyone's lips lately, and some are looking back at history.
In fact, we've not heard inflation talked this much since really the 1970s.
That's because over the past few months, prices for everything from gasoline to groceries have been rising sharply as the economy roars back from the pandemic recession. This graph charts the Consumer Price Index, a metric that measures the average change in prices for consumer goods and services compared to a year ago, or more simply put, inflation. In May of this year, prices spiked 5% to reach the highest annual inflation rate in nearly 13 years. Many economists believe that a small amount of inflation, around 2%, is inevitable and even desirable. That's essentially what we've had for the past 15 years before this most recent surge. But these recent increases have some fearing that the US might be returning to the runaway inflation of the 1970s.
No one wants to see that happen again.
So, are we returning to the spiraling inflation of the late 1960s and 1970s? Or is today's inflation, as the Fed assures us, transitory?
This is an extraordinarily unusual time.
For those old enough to remember it, The Great Inflation was a period in which the cost of living for millions of Americans soared. From 1965 to 1982, prices for food and everyday consumer items rose dramatically from 2% in 1962 to 15% in 1979. During that same period, unemployment also rose steadily, eventually reaching just above 10%. The term stagflation, an economic condition of both rising inflation and increasing unemployment, became the go-to phrase to describe the period's economic malaise. This was a time when consumers protested rising meat prices, union members picketed for cost of living pay increases, and long lines for unemployment and gas became commonplace.
Here in New Jersey, 10% of the workforce is unemployed. Across the nation, the average is 8%.
The main lesson from the 70s is that kind of nagging, persistent, recurrent double-digit inflation doesn't happen overnight. It sets in over many years, and it set in because of a long series of policy mistakes in Washington.
The Great Inflation has its roots in the government spending of the 1960s. Consumer prices began rising under President Johnson as he escalated the Vietnam War and launched his Great Society social programs. But the double-digit inflation the period is famous for didn't begin until President Richard Nixon took office.
The time has come for a new economic policy for the United States.
In 1971, Nixon ordered that the dollar would no longer be backed by gold.
Inflation robs every American, every one of you.
Nixon also influenced the Fed's monetary policy, pushing the central bank to pump more money into the economy and keep interest rates low.
By letting inflation rise gradually for a number of years, the Fed compromised the trust the public held that the Fed would maintain price stability. Businesses and households started expecting that inflation would persist.
As prices went up, workers started pressing, in part for unions, and as wages went up, companies started raising prices even more, and we got this game of leapfrog where prices and wages both went up.
We must whip inflation right now.
These policy missteps continued under President Ford.
So you guys kind of get an idea of what we're going through. Now, I don't know how many people were available or around in 1976 who can remember the oil embargo, the long lines. We talk about gas prices now. You're talking about lines. I remember my parents would get up at like way before the crack of dawn just to be in line to get gas under President Jimmy Carter because we had oil embargo. And the price of gas not only had gone up, but it was scarce. And so you're dealing with a scarcity economy as well. Let me give a shout out. Walaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Much love to you and your family. Thank you for joining us. What we're talking about, brothers and sisters, and I think needs to be talked about even more, is the piece with Richard Nixon, where we moved away from a dollar that was backed by gold. We moved away from that situation. Let me tell you guys something. If you took $20 in 1976, I was reading, that $20 due to inflation rates would be worth about $96.76. That $20 in 1976 will be worth $96.70. What does that tell you guys? Yesterday's price is not today's price. And the similarities whereby they talk about the unions pressing for more wages. Here's the interesting thing, brothers and sisters. The unions are not particularly powerful here in the United States. So you have a wealth of a workforce that's basically going out, I don't want to say on strike, but they're refusing to take jobs that they know are going to put them in very, very compromised positions in terms of their ability to pay their bills and their living expenses. So you have these two things that are on, I want to say that the balance is there. Neither one of them is good. So let's kind of talk about what we can do. I'm going to say this, and I can take all the flack, and you guys can beat me up all you want to. this particular time of inflation is when, hear me clearly, is when you should start thinking about starting your business. You should start thinking about starting your business. Getting your LLC or your S Corp or your incorporation. Start your business now. Why? Because the price of your business now is not going to be the price of your business later. Meaning that the thing about inflation is that it will dissipate. But what happens is as you accrue value in your business, the value in your business will not dissipate. I will tell you guys, I am a living example with COVID. With COVID, I indulged in a bunch of different skills. I had time. Many of you know I got my master's, but I had time to sit around and say, wait a minute, I can pivot and learn this, pivot and learn that. And what I did was for business model, I decided to stay very, very consistent with what I was doing. Hence, the Shout Out Show did 514 episodes. Why? There's an economy of being able to talk to brothers and sisters like yourself who would hear me out and give me reactions, tell me if I was on point or I was BSing or I need to work on myself. Whatever it was, brothers and sisters, what happened is nobody can take away the economy and the experience that I gained from this. So if you're thinking about learning your business or starting your business, I'm not saying particularly fund it all, brothers and sisters, but understand the ramifications of business and begin to build towards that. Build towards it. A lot of times people work for the most perfect situation and scenario to start their business. No, this is the time. You know why? Because most of the people in the marketplace are getting out of that. They're getting out of this space. They're getting out of this space. They're not willing to plant seeds, put that water on, rain place, rain to shine, snow, rain to shine, and plant those seeds to build their business. If you have a job, brothers and sisters, that you're doing right now, and you're saying, hey, this job does not necessarily meet what I need in terms of sustainable wage, you now have a spot where you could barter. Don't quit, barter. Don't quit, negotiate. Don't quit, communicate. And these are the things, brothers and sisters, when we talk about trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, this is where it comes from. Because if you have creativity, you have a modicum of inspiration, and you have what we say is hard work and dedication, you're willing to get it from the dirt or get it from the mud, this is the time for you. Because inflation reflects the fact that it's built upon bad decisions. That's what a bad economic policy is. It's a bad decision. And of course, for rich folk, I won't say rich white folk, but for rich folk, if they catch a cold, people like us get pneumonia, but not necessarily have to get pneumonia. If you're not prepared, if you're not building up your financial immune system, you will get pneumonia. It'll happen. Happens to the best of us. But if you're taking in the information that's out there, and here's the thing I want to emphasize. This information is out there. It's been out there for a long time. They started talking about the inflation issue 6 months ago. On this show, we talked about issues about supply over in Europe. If it happens in Europe, you got about 4 or 5 months to figure out it's going to be coming here. Brexit and things like that. We live in a global economy. And we live in a global economy in terms of our health. Therefore, if they're having problems with COVID or resurgence of COVID over in Europe, we're going to get it here. So all I'm saying is, brothers and sisters, put the tea leaves in the water, read the tea leaves, but understand there's value to the water and the tea leaves. And be able to reframe that other than just making tea. Clearly, and I'm going to say this clearly, the powers that be in the financial world, look at us. They look at us as proxies. They look at us as folks who summarily are going to clean up their messes. So when they drop the ball on economic issues, they believe that inflation should be passed on to them. No, we're going to pass something back to them. We can't pass the inflation back to them, but we can pass, brothers and sisters, sustainability and creative narrative that allows us as business people and individual heads of families to say, wait a minute, I have a plan that's better than yours. And to be able to take that plan and interject it, you know, I'll give you a story of my Uncle Reggie. My Uncle Reggie was one of the best salesmen I ever saw in the world. And I used to marvel at this guy when he would talk about sales and stuff like that. But what he could do was, brothers and sisters, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. He could sell gasoline to Satan. He was that good of a salesman. But what he was able to do, brothers and sisters, was predict and forecast human behavior in the concept of a conversation. He could put a word here knowing that this word would move you that way or this word would move you that way, would move you back. He would lower his voice. He would come in. And I said, this is amazing because that's how he made $1 out of 15 cents. He understood that in his space, he had talents and skills. And like I reiterate to my family all the time, the idea of talent, everybody has a talent, but it takes what? Skill to get paid for the talent, and it takes discipline to maintain the skill. We already have an economy with the inside of the economy. As believers, as Muslims, Christians, we do have a very, very unique economy that we can lean on. I don't know if people know that, but there's such a thing as a faith economy. Recently in the Washington Post, we listed that American Muslims were the most generous religious group in the United States. I'm saying that to my dad at this point. He said, I believe that. And it wasn't about the fact that we give. It's the fact that we give in a system. And we give in a system that we believe is tied to the revenue of the community, but also the revenue of well-being and protection of the community. Therefore, when we have issues of inflation, it's interesting that we gave more. Why? Because that system, brothers and sisters, has been pre-existing all the way back to the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who also introduced the idea of holding on to property, holding on to IP products, banking, being trustworthy. So, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you know what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? I'm saying that this potentially is the time for all of us to get our act together. In inflation, this is what I found very, very helpful. Work on your credit. Work on your credit. People, I'm telling you, working on your credit can do wonders because in a situation like this, because people are having credit crunches and money's not moving forward, if you have good credit, you can negotiate for more credit. That house you want to buy, well, houses may not be to buy right now because of the supply chain. People can't get wood. We had brother Omar Kareem on here, who's a real estate developer, talking about why housing prices are so high because they can't get supplies. Well, if I'm a businessman, I'm trying to say, well, where is it we can get supplies? What are the supplies I can get without problems? And one of them is intellectual capacity. I think one day, and maybe Satana will help me out, I think one day we're just going to have a creative narrative class here on the Shout Out Show. And I'm going to take time, because I'm going to do it with Sister Satana. I've already dedicated myself to it. Teaching people how to pitch for money. Teaching you the language that my uncle will run past me to make people emotional and decisive and lingering. I don't want to say linger, but move them towards action. Am I going to buy and I'm not going to buy? Am I going to buy or I'm going to buy more? Or am I going to ask for a different type of services? Brothers and sisters, this is the economy that we live by. The inflation thing is what people go through when they have a lot of money. I remember I had to do a show, and I'll wrap up on this. I had to do a paper one time on the depression. And I asked my grandfather, I said, Granddaddy, when the depression hit, what did you do? He said, well, I ain't know there was a depression. He said, Negroes were doing bad all the time. He knew it was a depression. And I laughed because in some regards, I'm like, we are that, folks. We are those people. It's just in 2021. So look, let me go ahead and wrap up. How you doing? What's going on, brother Yusuf? Good to see you, man. I know, and brother Yusuf, we got to come back on about these NFTs. I got to talk to you about those as well. Shout out, walaikum assalam to my brother. So listen, I'm gonna let everybody go. I hope I wasn't long-winded. You know, sometimes when you get into a space, it is like teaching. Sometimes when I teach, I have to remind myself of things I've gone through to make sure that this thing is relevant and applicable to what we're all going through. So, wasn't a whole lot of jokes in there, but you know, when you're dealing with money, you're trying to take care of your family and pay your bills and your house. Y'all know that ain't funny. So for myself, on behalf of myself, Sister Satana, we're going to say that's what it is right now. We appreciate you. We hope to see you tomorrow. Think about some of the stuff I talked about. Think about, you know, in this inflation space where people are willing to make a deal because they can't make their mortgage. They can't make their car payments. I mean, I get calls all the time, probably you do too, for people that want to buy my 2016 car because they can't get parts. A new car is 9% more than what it is because they can't get the circuitry and the chips and all that type of stuff. So they're paying more. I could probably get more for my car than what I actually paid for it. But real talk, when I go to get another car, guess what? I got to pay more. So remember, yesterday's price is not today's price. With that, we're going to go ahead and get to our sponsors. We want to give a shout out to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, brothers and sisters. Go to that website. Start talking about and getting a dialogue about your finances. This is the time to do it. Don't get into a situation where you're at the end of your rope and you don't have the money, or the money you could have had. Remember what I told you about that? You know, $20 in 1976 is worth $96.77 now. Yeah, think about that. Why? Do the math. Because inflation is a business. So make sure you go to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. If you don't want to go there, call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. As well, if you're trying to build that emotional, religious capital within yourself, you got to go to Bayan Islamic Graduate School and check them out. They are at bayanonline.org, and that's bayanonline.org with a plethora of programs: Islamic studies, Islamic leadership, Islamic education. They have doctoral level courses. Also, brothers and sisters, you got to check them out. One of the premier programs for Muslim chaplaincy, the MDiv and Muslim chaplaincy. Check them out. Look, I got to go. You guys have been amazing. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow. Think about what I said. That business. What's your economy? I'm Preacher Moss. This is S.O.S. Take care. Peace. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, team, we've come to the end of yet another show. And I have to say, I had a good time, and I hope that you had a good time as well. Listen, at this part of the show, we have no more show. I could literally sing a song saying we have no more show. However, to spare all of us that embarrassment and chaos, I'm just going to say, please join us tomorrow here on the Shout Out Show, Monday through Thursdays, and every first Saturday, we do our Saturday Spotlight. Here we are again, 5 to 5:30 on the Central Time. And of course, we're going to do our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock p.m. And of course, that would be 6 o'clock on the West Coast. So, time for you to go, because it's time for me to go. I think I will do that song. Thank you for coming to the show. Thank you for coming to the show. That's all the lyrics I wrote. But you get the idea. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.